Everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 14th, and it is 7 o'clock, and we are here for the regular meeting of the Coppell City Council. There is a quorum present, so I will call the meeting to order. I just want to remind everyone that, as if you need to be reminded, that we are doing things a little differently now. We are, in light of some of the rules that have been suspended by the governor, we've been able to make sure that we have a quorum when not all city council members are present. So we have everyone here. 3 are here virtually, and 4 are here in person, and we're trying to social distance, so we are farther apart than we normally are. And so we'll call the meeting to order, and we first will go into work session. And initially, our first item is to the discussion of any agenda items. Council members, are there any agenda items that you would like to discuss? Sorry, Wes. I'm looking. Wes, he's not there. Please.
I'm right in front of you.
Yes, you are.
I don't know that I've got a consent agenda item. I don't know that I want to pull it, but I'd like to have Bob kind of explain it if he could during the session, and that's item number D. I think I understand it, but I'd like to hear it kind of from him.
D?
D as in dog.
Okay, and so you want that now, or you want it during the meeting, or both?
Don't think it needs to be done both times, but just once, and either now or later.
Bob, are you there?
He is.
Can you chime in?
Hey, Bob, you're on mute.
There he is.
Yeah,
now you're on mute. You need to unmute.
There. Am I there now? Hello?
Yes, sir. You're there. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Mays and members of the council, this is an item, as you are aware, as a result of some online or hack into our system, changing of a corporate name. Funds were redirected from the city to the appropriate company that was performing work with the city as handling our progress payments on a road project, and that money was diverted to a dummy account. During the course of the good work of the city finance department, we were able to capture those funds, and the Secret Service, which had jurisdiction over the investigation of this item, then took custody of those funds. As a result of that, we had to file suit to claim ownership of those funds. And this lawsuit basically was instigated by the city at your authorization against basically the U.S. government, since they held those funds, Secret Service. And this is merely the documents that we need to have those funds forfeited from the Treasury and the Secret Service to the city, and then deposited back in the city's general fund.
So thank you very much, Bob. What was the hold harmless portion of the agreement?
What they're saying is by releasing that money, that we don't have any claim against the federal government for any other funds.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Are there any other questions about this? Okay, about any other agenda items? Okay, Hearing none. Then we will move to item B, which is discussion of DART. And we have Ms. Leach, there you are, coming to us remote.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I am very pleased to be here today to provide an update and really continue the discussion that we had at the March 24th council meeting. Kevin, if you'll go to the next slide, please. The purpose of our briefing here tonight will be to follow up on some of the items that were brought up by the City Council at that last meeting, and then provide the council with an update on the prioritization exercise that we had asked you all to complete for us. Okay, next slide, please. This slide just shows the items that I had marked down that we were going to bring back to the council in terms of some follow-up information. Some of those are in DART's court, and we are still working with DART on all of those items that you see there. The one item that we do have resolution on is the question related to the single span or the column for the bridge as it crosses over South Beltline. And the design for that will have columns in the middle of the median along South Beltline, so that won't be a clear span all the way across. There will be columns. But in terms of the rest of those, we will continue. We'll be bringing back that information to the council as DART's continuing to work through refining those numbers for us on those items. There were two items that we marked down that were in our court to resolve and provide some information on. The first of those is the precast walls and how that related to the zoning ordinance, and then how we would kind of handle those and what that approach would be for future developments that had walls. And so at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Hager to walk us through that piece.
Okay. There was a question posed with regard to whether or not DART as a public utility and I guess state chartered transportation authority was subject to the zoning regulations of the city with regard to the sound barrier, which would go on the north side of the right-of-way. Our research has indicated that generally this public utility is not exempt from the city's zoning requirements if they were to build or construct a facility within our corporate limits. However, since this is a rail line which DART has proposed, or which has, I guess, purchased and is still used for rail transportation, I don't believe that we could successfully claim that they would have to build the sound barrier in accordance with the city's zoning screening wall requirements within that right-of-way. I've gone back and looked at some case law. I think it supports our first conclusion, and there's plenty of case law to support that conclusion, that a public utility, such as a gas utility, electric utility, and in this case, the railroad, would generally, if they built a facility in town, would have to comply with our zoning regulations. However, this rail corridor, for lack of a better way of saying it, and I'll try to put it in a context which you can all understand without getting into a long, laborious analysis of the Texas Constitution, they're grandfathered. This rail line pre-existed, from at least my research, the corporate limits of the city. We annexed it with the rail line in place. So we believe that ultimately, if we were to challenge them in court, we would be unsuccessful to require them to build a sound barrier in accordance with our zoning regulations. So they have kind of a unique position in the Constitution of the state of Texas, the rail line, not so much DART, but the rail And so for those reasons, our advice to you is negotiate the best we can with DART to get the sound barrier that's most aesthetically pleasing to our city. And that I don't believe this would constitute some kind of waiver or precedent which would keep us from enforcing the zoning regulations. As I told Tracy, if DART wanted to build a station within our corporate limits, they would have to comply with our zoning regulations to do so. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Bob, I think the last part of what you said is what we were wondering, is if we would either have to waive it or if we should have some action, because we didn't feel that we would be able to change it. But you're saying that we do not have to waive it or do any kind of action toward our ordinances for this particular structures.
I believe that is correct, Mayor.
Okay, thank
They're
you.
either grandfathered. We don't have to grant an SUP. We can't waive our zoning regulations. I feel that the zoning regulations, as it relates to within that right of way, is probably grandfathered.
Okay.
And we cannot regulate that as we normally would other construction within our city.
Thank you. Any other
Yes.
questions on that particular item? Okay, Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
The next piece here was to follow up on providing some context on the security fence, on how that will be laid out, what it really looks like in the field installed. And so I do have some photos for us to look at. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is the standard security fence that would be installed if no upgrades were included. This is at Valley View in Farmers Branch, just to the east of 35. This is, if you can see here, after looking at these fences, they are actually 4-foot fences instead of 6-foot fences, as I originally believed them to be. So as you can see, it is just chain link for us on the layout, what we would have in Coppell. So on this side, closest to the double track, on the track that's closest to us would be where the betterment wall would be. And then on the other side of that betterment wall would be the proposed trail. And then on the other side of the trail is the homes. And so this is the chain link that would be closest to the Beltline roadway. I did provide a kind of a blow up of that on the top right corner to give you a little better idea of kind of what that looks like. And so this is just the standard fence that goes in if no upgrades are included. Go to the next slide, please. This is in Plano at the East 15th Street crossing here. And as you can see, they did upgrade the fencing at this location. It is still 4 foot. However, they did upgrade that to the steel. And as you can see on the blow up in the inset, they have placed that on a concrete footer. So it does have the mow strip at the bottom. And so there is a fairly significant visual difference between both of those installations, depending on which fencing type we want to pursue. I'll pause right here for just a moment to answer any questions that council might have in terms of layout, in terms of look. I have requested additional information from DART on a 4-foot fence. So everything we've been talking about up to this point has been 6 foot. And that was my error. I was under the impression that those were 6-foot security fences. And so I have asked them for a quote on a 4-foot vinyl coated security fence. And so they are working on that for us as well.
Go ahead.
Tracy, this is Nancy.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said vinyl coated. So what is this a wrought iron one, a painted wrought iron, the one that we're looking at?
It's like a steel fence. It looks very similar to what we have over at Allen Road in terms of material.
And so then the vinyl coated one, is that, do we have a picture of that, or
No, that would just be regular chain link, but it's got that vinyl coating,
Okay.
so it does have an improved aesthetic look from just the standard chain link, but it is still chain link.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other thoughts or comments? Gary, I think that's you behind there going like this.
Yeah, I think the misnomer here is when they say security fence. If it's 4 feet and it's open at any intersection, it's really not providing any security. It's just somewhat of a notification for someone walking along there that they wouldn't just happen to stumble onto the tracks. Am I understanding that right?
So just from the layman's perspective, I can give you my layman's perspective, and then I'd like to, David Ehrlicher with DART is on the line with us this evening, and he could provide a little more information as well. You're right, that fence does not wholly close off the rail corridor, but what it does do is really force you, if you're trying to access that rail really from any point other than that intersection, you have to take some sort of proactive action to hop that fence and get over that. So, a child chasing a ball or dogs or any of that stuff, that would provide that barrier for those interactions. But to your point, it does not 100% seal off access to the actual rail corridor. David, do you have any additional input that you'd like to provide here?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Just 3 quick points. Good observation. Security fence is synonymous with pedestrian control. Second point, it is inherently open at grade crossings. And then the third point, while your image of Farmers Branch is spot on, our typical approach on the light rail facilities is a 6-foot chain link fence. As we approach the intersections, they taper down to 4 foot and splay away from as far from the center line of tracks as possible. So what you've got, that image of Farmers Branch is just a unique situation that occurs at the intersections on the light rail facilities. Back to you.
So I'm sorry, this is a little bit more difficult. So are you saying that it will be a 6-foot fence and then it will taper down to a 4-foot at the intersection?
That is correct. However, since this is regional rail, not light rail, the design team is still working on what specifically happens at the intersections, how close the fence gets, a fence or a wall would get, how far away from the tracks, how does that work with the quiet zone, all the equipment that goes with the quiet zone. So, but for final design still being developed for the intersection, the answer is yes. The typical security fencing along the right-of-way is a 6-foot chain link fence.
Any other questions about that? Gary, was that?
Yeah, just to comment. So my recollection is, other than the most recent fencing that we did around football fields, like at Middle School North, our typical approach around town for other government entities like the school district has been the vinyl coated chain link. That's correct?
And I may have to defer to either
Gary,
city manager
we'll verify it
or I
tomorrow.
can
But
come back with that one. I'm not sure.
my memory is
My understanding is we typically not let businesses or residents utilize chain link, but we have allowed the school district. But when we've done that, it's been vinyl coated, I guess is
Gary, at Middle School North, we actually had them put in more like what you're seeing on Farmers Branch, but taller. In Plano, but taller. It wasn't vinyl coated chain link fence. It was a metal fence. Because we ended up having to I say having, we ended up sharing in the cost of upgrading that fence in response to the neighbors not wanting the chain link fence. Right. So that, but we'll verify that tomorrow, but that's what I recall on Middle School North. And on the Middle School West campus, that was a chain link fence, but there was an alley, if I recall. They treat it as in trees, green trees, shrubs, and that was a chain link fence as well.
But just clarification, my recollection of that was because it was immediately adjacent to residences. In this case, it's not immediately adjacent to residences. You have a sound wall between the residences and whatever this security fence is, correct?
That's my understanding, right, Tracy?
Yes. Yes.
The chain link fence would be on the north side of the wall, which would be between Beltline, the tracks.
On the south side of the wall.
South side, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Okay.
Mayor, this is Wes.
Wes. Okay, Wes.
Thank you. Tracy, do you have an estimate of the difference of cost per foot on the two types of fencing?
I do not. Dart and Archer Western are still working on those rough order magnitude costs for us.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to remember, to Councilman Roden's point, at North, that was a very residential, very, very close environment to the chain link, and this is appears to be a little bit less residential and quite a bit more industrial and not inconsistent. So it'd be interesting to see the difference in costs, though. So thank you very much.
My only point on that particular comment is that Beltline, it's a long stretch, and right now they're seeing the backs of houses, and there's really not a whole lot there. So we'll see the brick wall or the concrete wall, and then this, and then this, right? And then it will be the road.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That is true, but if you also think about it, on the south side of Beltline, going down to Cypress Waters, there's a chain link fence there, and it's 6 or maybe feet or even higher.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And we've got barbed wire along the north side right now along some sections. So I think we're kind of, I don't know that it's going to be that critical to be very decorative at that area.
Okay, so as we get those numbers, we'll spend more time with that.
Thank you.
Yep, and we will follow up with those. Okay, could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is a slide that should be familiar to you. I did include this in the presentation at the last meeting. The one change I did make was to update it based on the direction that we got at the last meeting related to the quiet zones. And so I did add a row that showed what the subtotal of our funding that was available once we included the Royal Lane quiet zone. And so the 750 is what has been set aside over the last 3 or 4 fiscal years. That is what's there today. $430,000 is what is the subtotal once we net out the cost of Royal Lane. And so then the rest of the items is all exactly as we presented it at the last meeting, with the placeholders for the different options for the security fencing. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the prioritization results. And so what we had asked the City Council to do was provide a rating and a prioritization. We listed each one of the 8 different enhancement options, and we asked the council to look at those and make prioritization decisions. Really, by taking the cost out of the discussion. So in a vacuum, which of these are most important to you individually? And then we aggregated all of those ratings. And so the lower the number, the more important it was aggregate for the city council as a whole for that particular item. What I think this does provide is a little bit of insight into our priorities so that we can then start having a conversation about where we want to go once we start overlaying costs to that. And so if we look at this, the retaining wall painting, so that was all of the walls that we will actually start seeing construction on in the next quarter or so for the elevated crossing at South Beltline. So it's the painting of the walls there. It's the addition of the city logo on the bank caps. It's the painting of the sub and superstructure. And it's the landscaping pieces for both on the north and south side of where the bridge will cross on South Beltline, and then landscaping along East Beltline on both sides of the roadway where the retaining walls are. And then we really get down into the security fencing, and then the form liners and the treatments for the columns themselves are at the bottom of that list. And so if we can go to the next slide, what I've done is overlaid the prioritization. So each one of those items is listed in the priority order that we showed in the last slide. And I have overlaid that with a running total cost on the far right column. And so as we start working our way down, the landscaping is where we, getting down to actually the security fencing is where we really get down to making some decisions about whether we've got enough money in the bank right now to fund all of those improvements that are shaded green and up. My gut feeling says if we get an updated security fence, rough order magnitude cost, we're going to be really close to probably what we've got available, which is at $430,000. What I do want to do right now is just pause. If I want to say that if this rating, if something was rated very low on for example, the column treatments there, that does not mean that those are things that the council does not want to do. It just means that of this universe of things that we've asked you to consider, these other things were more important. So just because it's at the bottom doesn't mean those were things that the council does not want to do. Now, I'd like to open it up for conversation and discussion and questions that you all might have related to what you're seeing on your screen. Because if we were to move forward with everything as it's shown on the screen, including the 6-foot security fence as we've initially got it, we would need to then have an additional follow-up conversation on funding. So I'll pause here and answer any questions and open that up for discussion.
I just want to give us a time check. We got about 3 minutes. So, Mr. Roden.
Just a quick question, Ms. Leach. Item 5, I want to make sure I understand that. I understand 4 is the actual landscaping in the esplanade on Beltline. Item 5, we're talking about landscaping as the rail grade increases and then decreases on either side. Isn't a lot of that going to be hidden behind structures like our fire station and other structures?
Some of that will be maybe at some point. Today, if that's installed in the next 2 years, there's really not a whole lot there right now. And so in the way of screening and kind of softening that view of that wall of concrete that will be there for that retaining wall, that was the idea for those 2 landscape locations. But yes, knowing at some point there may be development that will obscure some of that view as you're traveling north-south on the South Beltline, that point is well taken.
I guess this question would be for David. Will that be a solid retaining wall or will that be columns like we see in Carrollton?
What I will need to do is make sure the drawings are in the slide deck for the next meeting, next presentation, because it'll be both. It'll be retaining wall up to an abutment, I'll have to, I'm sure the abutment is occurring some distance away from the actual street crossing. And then, of course, it's an elevated structure supported by columns from abutment on the west side to abutment on the east side. So I'm going to have to show you exactly where the abutment is, so you'll be informed on what happens where.
Okay, so I guess, Tracy, and not to make this more complicated, I would think maybe there's another option there, and that's to have some landscaping as the train elevates, as it leaves Beltline, and then as it returns to Beltline, East Beltline, and then some landscaping close to South Beltline, but that whole area between where it's far away from East Beltline, to me, I just don't know that it makes sense to both install and maintain that landscape.
Okay. We can look at some smaller scale options on that.
I mean, I may be the only one that thinks that. That's just a thought.
Mayor, this is Wes.
Yes, sir.
I realize we're out of time, but I would like to reserve some time with Tracy to understand the financials. I'm not quite clear on the subtotal funding available and the $750,000 that was set aside. So I need her to run through that with me, and I'd be happy to do that offline just so that I understand it.
Okay. We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Tracy, do you have more?
No, the next slide we have, I really think just walks through what kind of our next steps are, knowing that we have some additional follow-up that we're going to be bringing back to the council in the way of kind of buttoning up a lot of those questions that Dart and Archer Western are still working on. And then, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we will codify all of that in an addendum to the master ILA with Dart.
Perfect. So, David, I know you're working hard to get us information, and it seems like there's still a lot of finalization for us to make the decisions that we need to make. So we appreciate all your work and working with Tracy to help us with that. Councilmember Long.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, Tracy, for us visual guys, pictures would be nice, adequate drawings, pictures, so that we can see what as close as possible, the end result would look like on each one of those things, because it's critical, just like Gary alluded to, that we understand what we're approving as far as the structures and what they look like.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
I guess that's the end of work session, and we go directly, which we've never done before. This will be new. The time is 7:33, and we will adjourn from work session and go directly into regular session. We'll start tonight with invocation, and Councilmember Nancy Yingling will help us with that, and then we will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for letting us all gather today as we celebrate you. We thank you for sharing your love and your compassion during these most unusual times. We thank you for giving us the strength to make it day by day as we have so much uncertainty in front of us. Let us pray for those in our community who have been physically affected by the coronavirus. May they find healing to get them back on the road to recovery soon. We pray for those family members who have been separated during these trying times. May they find strength in you, Lord, and know that you are protecting them. Let us pray for the first responders, healthcare workers, the grocery store workers, sanitation workers, delivery workers, flight crews, city workers, and all essential workers who continue to forge forward so that we may have the care, the food, the supplies, and the services that we need. Lord, please watch over those who have lost their jobs and all the small business owners who are struggling to make ends meet. Please encourage those of us who are able to continue to support them in any way we can. I ask you, Lord, to guide all the leaders who are making decisions for our nation, our state, and our community. Give them the knowledge and strength to guide our nation back to a place of recovery. Though these times are hard and far from normal, Lord, I pray that we can continue to stay the course and lean on you, Lord. May we win this fight and heal together and get this great nation of ours back on track. It is in you, Lord, that we will find the strength. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's funny to see this. Okay. The next item on our list is citizens' appearance. And we have no one who has submitted anything for citizens' appearance. Okay, so now we will go to item 6, which is consider approval of a proclamation naming April 29th through 25th as National Library Week and authorizing the mayor to sign. And we have Dennis Quinn here remotely to join us in this proclamation. So, council members, please consider this proclamation. Whereas today's libraries are not just about what they have on the shelves, but more importantly, they are about what you can do with and for the community, whether it's through virtual services or in-person services. Whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions at the heart of their cities, towns, schools, and campuses. Whereas libraries and librarians help patrons find tools and resources to help improve the quality of their lives, explore new passions through technology, programs, and services. Whereas libraries strive to develop and maintain programs and collections that are diverse as the populations they serve and promote the free exchange of information and ideas for all. Whereas in a time of crisis, libraries play a critical role in providing support to their communities when it's most needed. Whereas the Cosby Library and Community Commons has been serving the city of Coppell in all these ways and more since 1974. Whereas libraries, librarians, library workers, and supporters across America are celebrating National Library Week, I therefore, Karen Selbo Hunt, the mayor of the city of Coppell, do hereby proclaim April 19th through the 25th, 2020 as National Library Week in the city of Coppell and encourage all of its residents to visit the Cosby Library online to take advantage of its wealth of resources and services and to engage with the library personnel and the fellow community members. In witness thereof, I've set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Coppell to be affixed this 14th day of April 2020. Council, Councilmember Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. Dennis, just on a personal note, you guys have done a great job accommodating the citizens during our shelter in place. So congratulations to all the efforts you've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I move to approve item number 6, consider approval of a proclamation naming April 19th through the 25th, 2020 as National Library Week and authorizing the mayor to sign.
Second by Councilmember Hill. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa, Smith, Mays, Roden, Yingling, Matthew, Hill. None opposed. Motion carried.
So Dennis, you've joined us. You're going to give us a little lowdown on what's going on at the library.
Yes, yes, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this proclamation and for your kind words. On behalf of the library, and I think in a way on behalf of all city departments, we recognize that we all have a role to play in supporting the community in these trying times, as has been noted previously. And each year in the spring, we join libraries and library lovers across the country in celebrating National Library Week. And as a library that believes so strongly in the power of community and in being a gathering place and in being sort of the living room of the community and fostering connections, we were really eager to embrace the theme of this year's National Library Week, which is find your place at the library. But that theme became problematic as coronavirus began sweeping the world. So for now, what we'd like you to do is we'd like to invite you to find the library at your place. As Councilmember Mays noted, we've been doing everything that we can to shift as much of our programming and our services online, which was not already, and embracing and amplifying the various services that we had already had online. In residents across the city are welcome to browse our collection of ebooks and audiobooks on Cloud Library, to stream video from our collection at Access Video on Demand. Students who are in the middle or nearing the end of the school year who need some supplementary assistance with subjects can get assistance with tutor.com. Folks who may be struggling in a career way can get career guidance and career help from tutor.com as well. Anybody who's interested in exploring a new language is welcome to try out Transparent Language Online or explore a new subject with Universal Class. And as always, we're looking to leverage our presence on social media through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to provide all kinds of fun and educational and engaging activities to kind of bring some levity to everybody's situation right now. And all of these resources and more can be found on our catalog at catalog.coppelltx.gov and coppelltx.gov/library. So now more than ever, I would like you, Council, and the community to know that Library Team and I, while we may not be able to have our doors open to the public, we are definitely still here for you online and virtually, and are looking for anything that we can do to help you imagine, discover, engage, and achieve. And to residents who don't have a library card yet, don't worry, we can also get you set up remotely with that. Just feel free to call or email us at any time, and we're happy to get you set up. Like I said, now more than ever, we're here for you, Coppell. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for the proclamation.
Thank you very much for joining us. It is an unusual time, but I do know that the resources that the library affords the citizens of Coppell are immense. So it's probably appreciated a whole lot more than anybody is telling you right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's now move to item 7. That is the consent agenda. Tonight we have items A through E. The consent agenda items are routine in nature and generally enacted in one motion. These items have been previously discussed or approved through budget or previous council action. Any item may be pulled to considered separately, and the full descriptions have been rotating on the screen. Council members, are there any items that you would like to pull and consider separately? Seeing none, Councilmember Yingling.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve consent agenda items 7A through E.
Second by Councilmember Long. All in favor?
Long, Hina, Hosa Smith, Mays, Roden, Yingling, Matthew Hill. None opposed. Motion carried.
Thank you. That is the end of the consent agenda. So now we move to item 8. This is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Consider approval of PD 213R 5-H Lost Creek Live Work, Lot 26R, Block 1, a zoning change request from PD 213R4-H to PD 213R5-H. Man, I wish you were here and I would have had you read it in. I know.
I can still read if you want.
I know. To revise the detailed site plan and approve the wooden fence in lieu of a masonry screening wall between the live-work property and residential property on 0.344 acres of property located at 564 through 568 South Coppell Road at the request of Haas Rose at Lost Creek LLC. And we have, where did she go? We have Mary Perone Boswell here. She is online, but we also will have Jason Rose and Mark Haas online as we go through this. So, Mary, it's up to you.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Item, next slide, please. So this item relates to the live-work units located on South Coppell Road and Heath Lane. Prior to 2015, this property was vacant. Next slide, please. The original application was for 5 buildings on the property. That application was withdrawn. A new application was submitted with a reduction in the number of buildings from 5 to 4. And after concerns by both staff and planning commission, the applicant then reduced the unit count from 4 to 3. So this case went through several iterations. It was ultimately approved in November of 2015 with a requirement that a minimum 6-foot tall masonry screening fence be provided between the live-work units and the residential neighborhood to the east of it. So the project has taken several years to build out, with the final item to be addressed being the screening wall component, which is before you this evening. Next slide, please. So, can you go back one slide? Thank you. So with this development, there's both on-street parking as well as parking to the rear of the site. It also has parking within the units. So this screening wall is between the 8 parking spots to the rear and the 1 residential unit that faces Heath Lane. So currently there exists a 8-foot tall wooden fence that belongs to the residential unit. And it's the red line. I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen there. It goes from one end of the property up to roughly the porch. So it leaves about the last 2 parking spots exposed. And so this is with the residential unit. Now, the people that live in that residential unit on Heath Lane did provide a letter of support for that, leaving that wood fence in place. And if that was the case, then we would have to amend language in the property owner association for the live work units for the maintenance of that. Next slide, please. So this is the picture on the left to the top is a picture of the existing wood fence. To the right of it is the parking lot. To the left is the house. So there's about 15 feet from that wood fence to the house there. And the picture on the bottom is, I believe, the picture from inside the residential unit looking out towards the live work units. So what they're proposing is to essentially leave that wood fence in place. Next slide, please. So originally there was, the proposal was to extend the existing wood fence and add a brick column. So essentially that red line would go all the way up to the end of those 2 parking stalls, so up to the 15-foot building line. We did talk with the adjacent homeowner. They would prefer a living screen and irrigation. We did talk with our landscape people, and they suggested that the trees probably wouldn't fare well in that close proximity. So on February 20th, when we did take this to Planning and Zoning Commission, several of the nearby residents did show up. And there was 2 that spoke in opposition of the request. They were not in favor of the request based on the aesthetics of the existing fence. And at that meeting, Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend denial of that screening wall variance. They were also concerned about the aesthetics of the fence and the long-term maintenance of it. Next slide, please. So we did send out notifications, over 200. We received several phone calls. A lot of those phone calls were more of, they saw a zone change sign up and were just curious about what was happening. We did receive, like I said, 2 people show up to the P&Z meeting who were in opposition of the request. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, on February 20th, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial of PD 213 R5-H, a variance request to have a wooden screening fence in lieu of the required 6-foot masonry screening wall. So essentially, the applicant did appeal it. This is why we're here this evening. And so with that negative or denial by P&Z, a supermajority vote of the City Council would be required to overturn P&Z's recommendation. Next slide, please. So if City Council were to approve the requested variance, staff would suggest adding the following conditions. Number 1, that the existing wooden fence be replaced with a new fence located along the common property line with the, I don't know, better way to say it, the nice side of the fence facing the parking lot. 2, that provisions be placed in the property owner agreement to fund the future cleaning, maintenance of this fence in perpetuity. This would include staining of the fence every 2 years and general maintenance or replacement of the fence and landscaping when necessary. And 3, that the fence be extended to the 15-foot building line and end with a stone column as was originally presented by staff. We did receive one other, someone from, I guess, representing the realtor for Mr. Rose's project, I guess, who's looking at buying one of the units, and they would rather have the wood fence as well. So that was probably around 4 or 5 o'clock this evening we received that email. That's the end of my presentation. The applicant is here as well to present his case.
Okay, so we have Mr. Rose here. Is that you right there? Yep. Okay. So do you have anything that you would like to add? You're on mute. There you go. Do you have anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I would like to go through a quick spiel. You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jason.
Okay. The idea for this switch actually came from the neighbor at 517th Heath, the residential neighbor, the only neighbor adjacent to our property. Norman Meng is his name. And while we were out there building, I personally had multiple discussions with him. And the idea is it's a very natural setting over there. We're adjacent to a creek. Mr. Meng's house, we've set back over the 15-foot build line. He's probably 20 feet from our build line. On our development specifically, we have a total of 72 feet separated from his house, which includes a 10-foot landscape buffer from our property line to our parking, an 18-foot parking stall, a 24-foot fire lane, and a 5-foot build line. So we have significant separation. And when we informed him we were going to go in and build a masonry screen wall, he said, well, what's that going to look like? And I said, well, it's masonry. And his concern was the coldness of that material. He's very aesthetic, and he bought that lot specifically because he backs up to green space. And there's some exhibits that will show the trees that we planted to buffer him, some of the green space around his area. So this came about because of the residential adjacency homeowner bringing it to our attention. And I looked at it and I thought, you're right. And we've got an 8-foot cedar fence that would be replaced with a 6-foot masonry fence. Now the 8-foot cedar, the lifespan on a cedar fence is approximately 40 years. Now this hasn't been stained. That development's been out there. We built that fence for about 10 years. And yes, it does probably need to be restained. We've agreed to all of planning's recommendations to take over the ownership and maintenance of that fence for our development and stain that every 2 years. We've agreed to all of that. We feel like we get a softer, more natural appeal with a wood fence versus a cold masonry fence. If you look at your downtown historical area, commercial backs up to residential, not only was no masonry fences required, no fences were required at all, because there's certain places that those masonry fences look right. This is not one of them. I feel like this is going to detract from our development, and the neighbor brought it to our attention from the residential side. And typically when you guys approve a development deal, it's a future-looking thing. These are all existing homeowners, existing residential homeowner who's the only person butting up to our property line. Our 2 buyers, we have a new buyer that's about to close a house. He's trying to close in a week or 2. He agrees. He wants the wood fence. We're willing to go in. We're willing to accept the maintenance and responsibility of the fence, to adhere to all planning's recommendations, to keep that natural feel, because that's important to us. It's aesthetically, I think, in a benefit. If you've heard of heat islands, when you put masonry, typically it's referred to as the concrete you put on the ground. Sun bakes it in Texas. Heat radiates from it all the time. If you look at some of the pictures we've submitted with the trees and the red oaks, they're growing right up against that wood fence. If you put a masonry fence there that soaks up the sun all day long, that tree will not grow up near it. That tree will at least keep 10-foot distance from the radiating masonry heat. So I think it's a better solution. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in it. We don't have a dumpster. We're not shielding a heavy commercial use, a dumpster situation. So this has been brought about by a neighbor who thinks that wood, that cedar material, is just a softer, more residential look and is not concerned. And that's an 8-foot fence currently. The masonry fence would drop that by 2 feet. So obviously masonry is an expensive issue. And as you guys know, the masonry in a lot of subdivisions is only lasting about 10 years. Because what's happening is the ladder wire is rusting, the masonry fences are giving way, and cities are fighting with HOAs across the Metroplex to maintain these masonry fences. This cedar is the right solution. It's a metal post fence. It's doing its job. It's been stained. That subdivision is 10 years old. It was stained probably one time. We will adopt the maintenance of it. We will keep it looking good. And I think it's the right solution. I believe in it. So with that, I would answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We do have one individual who has submitted public comment on this. It comes from Darlene Blunt, and I will read this. Hi, I'm Darlene with Crane Realty. I am currently working with a buyer for 564 South Coppell Road. He is a fellow realtor who wants to open up his new office in Coppell. He is very much in favor of keeping the current natural aesthetic in the property. His firm opinion is that this would provide a preferred softer look. He and others that I have spoken to regarding this property agree that adding a concrete brick wall is too harsh for the beautiful quaintness, that's a hard word to say, of the walkable Coppell neighborhood. Darlene. So with that, there's no other comment. So I will turn it over to council for questions or comments. Anybody have any questions or comments? Councilmember Roden.
Mute.
Gary, you're on mute.
Sorry, thought I had it off. Thank you. First, the concept that a wood fence is good for 40 years and a masonry screening wall is good for 10 years, I just can't buy into. So I had to say that. I do think we had some initial masonry screening walls in town that didn't have appropriate piers under them, but that was changed. And I think for the most part, the masonry walls that we've had built in the last 15 years or so have held up well. My concern with this, I understand the residential feel, but I have a concern based on the challenge we have elsewhere in town where we do have a wood fence that everybody thought there was a great agreement as to who was going to maintain it. And then 20 years later, as the fence is paying, there's a lot of concern about who's actually owns the fence and who has to maintain it. In this case, we've got a POA that doesn't own the dirt under the fence, and so they don't actually own the fence, but they would have some kind of maintenance agreement on it. So the only way I could see me being willing to approve this would be if we really had some ironclad language about how it gets maintained into the future. There is the potential, I would think, to put the masonry fence on the west side and leave the wood fence on the east side, and that way the resident wouldn't see it. And that's why we have masonry fences, to separate commercial uses from residential, and so that there's clearly not a maintenance issue.
Councilmember Hill.
I have to agree with Councilman Roden. The contention that a wood fence only, that will last 40 years and masonry 10 is really just preposterous. But I do agree that this was an existing fence, and since it was existing as a wood fence, it should be allowed to be maintained as a wood fence, and also some sort of a maintenance agreement, as Councilman Roden said, something that's ironclad. There's no question about it. You can't abandon the easement or any kind of thing like that. And I like the idea of softening that separation between the commercial and the residential. Thanks.
Councilmember Yingling.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, do you happen to have any kind of a visual on what the masonry fence, or Ms. Boswell, can you give us are you talking about concrete or brick, or what do we have a visual, Mr. Rose?
The ordinance on masonry doesn't specify anything. And it just ends up being there's several bricks made, and you guys have required double white now. Mm-hmm. And it's brick, it's masonry.
Okay.
And while you guys have changed your ordinance. When this original PD came about, the idea was that masonry fences were failing everywhere. And you guys adopted a double white fence requirement. And that was, I think that was forward looking. It's 6 foot instead of 8 foot, but the 40-year statistic on cedar is provable. It's documented. That's not an exaggeration. I could give you the proof of that, and you can probably look all around your city and fights you guys are with HOAs where those masonry fences around neighborhoods are creating major issues. It's going on in every city in the Metroplex.
Thank you.
You've seen enough masonry. Okay.
Thank you. Personally, I ran into this in my neighborhood 24 years ago where I actually came and spoke before council, whether we were going to put in a wood fence at the end of my cul-de-sac to divide up the neighborhood that was on the other side. That was 24 years ago. And I agree with Councilmember Roden that maintaining a masonry fence and a wooden fence completely aesthetically to me are different. And 24 years later, the masonry fence that's up at the end of my cul-de-sac is held up wonderfully. And I would hate to think having to go through changes of ownership and the land that it's on. And so I don't really see the benefit of having from an aesthetic standpoint and the holding up. You know, you get down the road 20 some odd years later and there is going to be potential issues. Who's going to be maintaining that? And that is really a big concern I have down the road. Thank you.
Councilmember Hinojosa Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Yingling and others that have spoken. I think my biggest concern is the maintenance of it. We talk about having some sort of ironclad maintenance agreement, but I don't even know how effective that would be. And so that's the area that I really struggle with is just the maintenance of it going forward. Right now it seems like, every 2 years is doable, but like you said, maybe in 20 years, what does that look like? So I will agree that's my biggest issue right now. Thank you.
One of the things that I've been down in this area and the buildings are not made of brick. So they are wood. So I think having a masonry fence there would look out of place. Personally, I like the idea of the wood fence, but I also in the recommendations from staff, doesn't it talk about actually moving the fence onto the property of the HOA?
So
extending the fence, which we've agreed to.
Right.
So with the at the last meeting, because where the fence was located, what did come into discussion, one of the options is you could move it a couple feet, so it would be totally on the applicant's property. I think that the delineation of the line, you can resolve that issue.
I couldn't understand what you said.
Mary, could you repeat the last couple of sentences there? It broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. In terms of when we were at P&Z, the discussion of the location of the fence, typically it's on the property line or slightly on one side or the other. You could adjust that where that fence is located, if that's the issue that you're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions for Mary. Number one, did you say that in 2016 some plans were approved by the council?
No, I was just giving you a brief history of the overall development.
So there was some application submitted and withdrawn. When was that?
I was just talking about the live work development in general, not the fence. So when this development came forward, originally they were looking at 5 units. At some point in time, it got down to 3 units and got approved at City Council. And part of that PD requirement was that they build a masonry screening wall.
Okay.
And so now, several years down the road, as the construction has finished on this project, the screening wall is the last thing that has to be constructed.
And so in the last couple of months, Mr. Rose approached us asking if he could put in a wood fence. And so that is why we are here this evening.
Okay, my second question is, what was the reason the PNC denied just for this wooding fence? Are there any other reasons?
So we had, they were looking at, items that you just discussed in terms of having a fence on a residential property and then having the live-work units having to maintain it. How would that translate over time, as well as the aesthetics of having a wood fence versus the masonry screening wall, and how that would look and provide screening for the neighbors and the look as you drive into that community.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hager?
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to the ability to have an agreement in which we've had this in the past where we've had issues with the maintenance when it no longer is the original people that owned the property, and now it's to the HOA or to a group of people. Can you talk to the fact of having an agreement that would be very enforceable to make sure that the live-work HOA would be responsible for that maintenance of that fence?
Yes, Mayor and Council. If the council wants to entertain to allow any kind of fence other than what's required, that fence has to and must be constructed on the HOA controlled property. I could not write an agreement where I could force one property owner to maintain a fence belonging to another person. That's untenable.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Hill.
Mr. Hager, I want to ask you a question. Typically with HOAs, they have a time period of 30 years. You know if that's the case for this POA?
The POA documents I have not reviewed, Councilman Hill, so I couldn't and don't have any recollection of having approved those. But you are correct that they're generally covenants that run with the land, and they do have an expiration.
And I think in the past you've said anything more than 30 years is considered onerous by the state.
Once you get past 30 years, then it becomes more subject to law against perpetuities, and there are a lot of legal reasons. But in essence, you're correct. We generally look at anywhere from 30 to 50 years that we found case law to enforce those kind of deed covenants.
So even if they move the property line or move the fence, where we're kind of stuck with what the limits of the POA covenants are, unless they decide to renew them, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Roden? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I will learn this sooner or later. Thank you. What I understand is before us is a variance to allow the fence to stay on the current property owner's property, but write a POA requirement to maintain it, which the city attorney, if I just understood, said he can't do. Am I understanding that right, Mary?
That is what I heard as well. And so that's why, we started talking about moving the fence, or you could add a second fence. But typically you would I would think, want to move the fence versus having two fences side by side.
Mayor, I've got a motion unless there's more discussion.
I have Councilmember Mays has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my question is to Mary. This approval that we're being asked to approve doesn't mention anything about moving the fence. So that would need to come back before us as a separate item, would it not?
No, it could be part of this item.
If we modified it?
Yeah.
I would think you could modify it.
I'm based on the trouble that we've had in the other areas of town with and especially since the city attorney has given his opinion, I'm finding this one difficult to support myself.
Councilmember Hill, did you have another question?
Yeah, I did have one more question. So if this is built on the property line, are we obligating the neighbor to be responsible for the repair of half once it starts to fall down?
No.
No.
If it's on, it needs to be on a easement or some property that is controlled by the POA. If it's built within that property line, not on the property line of the adjacent owner, it's the responsibility of the POA or the homeowners for the live-work units to maintain it.
And if that easement was created, could they abandon it?
Now, whom? It would go, if you abandon, if it's created within the four corners of this development and it's abandoned, it goes to the adjacent property owner, who in this case would be the three homeowners that comprise the live-work units, because that's what it was created out of. So when you abandon it, that's what it goes back to. When you have an easement, all you do is have the rights in the land of another, and so each one of those properties that create the easement area are actually the underlying fee owner. So that if it's abandoned, it would go back to the live-work units, not to the adjacent property owner of the current residential property owner, of which is adjacent to the development.
Okay, because I'm just concerned about us getting in the situation that we have on another part of town if we did go this route.
So, Mr. Rose, are you interested in building this fence on your property or on the HOA property?
Yes, ma'am. We are willing to conform. We believe in this aesthetically. You guys just approved a deal just north of us with a far less of a setback that I've included in exhibit number 3, where the properties are extraordinarily closer that will have a wood fence. This would be the only masonry fence in the whole downtown development, historical development. There's commercial abutting residential. We have in this situation unique that all the property owners are existing, except for one house that I haven't sold, that all agree to this, that all want this to be wood. So we want to appease our homeowners who have made substantial investments in the city. We've worked hard to bring this development to you guys' expectations with the commercial component. We will do whatever. We want our residents to be happy.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Long.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to understand exactly what the legal ramifications here are if, in fact, we approve this, as the staff has suggested that we draw these agreements. So under those circumstances, is it going to be the POA that's going to be responsible, or would it be the one that is responsible, the entity that's responsible for maintaining the fence if it's a wooden fence?
The way that I understand it is if the fence is built on the POA property, it is the POA's responsibility. And if at some time 30 plus years in the future, it is abandoned, then it would be the owners of the individual three buildings that would be responsible for that fence.
Okay. So that's the legal aspect of it.
Did I get it right, Bob?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
In essence, I don't know that I would have given you 100% on your law school exam. But you probably got me.
Well, since I don't want to take the law school exam.
I didn't want to have to go home and precisely, and try to question the lady that I live with about this, since she's an attorney. The other thing is the aesthetics or the wooden fence itself. Obviously, living down there, I'm very familiar with the property, and the property, particular the property that's due south of these three little places, which is a board and bat structured house that was obviously built in the early 20th century, is right next door to these facilities. Behind that is a commercial operation in that Amanda has her flowers that she raises back there. So immediately behind the next door neighbor, who's saying that he would like to retain the wooden fence, is a flower garden. The fence is, in my opinion, much more appropriate, the wooden fence, than the masonry fence. For down there, no questions asked. I mean, it's going to be plus the fact that I consider, yes, the residential or the commercial aspect of the three units, but I also consider the fact that they're residential as well. So you got a residential you got three residences on one side, one on the other side. All of which feel like it's appropriate to have that fence there, the wooden fence there, as opposed to masonry fence. I just can't see us. I have trouble disagreeing with making that a masonry fence when all parties down there seem to want to have the wooden fence, and we can provide the legal structure in order to make sure that that fence stays in good shape and is attractive. Now, obviously, 30 years from now, there's a good possibility that I won't be around, but and some of us may not either. But it's not a kick in the can down the road. I think this is something that can be handled, and we can update things as we go by. So I just don't see the need to put the masonry fence there in that circumstance.
Thank you. Councilmember Roden.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think so. It looks to me like we have three options. The original zoning ordinance that we were presented that had us approving a fence on the homeowner side that was going to be maintained by the property owners on the other side, which Mr. Hager told us wouldn't work. And then I think we have two other options. One is to enforce the masonry wall requirement, which I think normally makes sense, but in this case may not because of just the area. And then there may be an in-between option, which is to take down the fence that is on the resident side, rebuild it with metal post and et cetera on the POA side, and to have the requirement to restain it every 2 years and maintain it. The only challenge with that is 30 years from now, when the thing is falling down and the POA dissolves, you may have a dispute between homeowners about a wood fence deteriorating between the two. I'm not sure that's terribly different than the disputes we have between residents all over town when that occurs. So I think I could get comfortable, maybe different from where I started this discussion, with that in-between option, but that would require this existing fence to be taken down and rebuilt on the POA side.
Councilmember Mace. You're on mute.
I apologize. I did not see that little red line down there. After going through this in the other subdivisions, I agree with Gary that the item here is placing it on the property of the POA so that they have responsibility. And as long as that is accomplished and the POA has the responsibility for maintaining it over the lifetime of the POA, then that would be workable, I think, as well. Thank you.
So, Mr. Roden, did you have you were ready to make a motion earlier.
I will make a try, and in the spirit of us doing affirmative motions, I would move to close the public hearing and approve item 8 with the amendment that the wood fence that is currently there would have to be demolished and a new wood fence with metal poles built on the west side or the POA side of the property with the same requirements to restain it every 2 years and to maintain it.
Is there a second? Councilmember Long? Did we miss anything?
Yeah, can you show I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For clarification, I guess point of clarification, can you show the conditions again that staff was good with?
That would be the person in the PowerPoint in the back.
Sorry.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Okay,
this
so it would
is
be this.
So this is the staff recommendation, which is basically to replace with a new wooden fence located on the POA side.
Which is different than what the zoning ordinance says right now.
Correct.
Well, these are the suggested conditions, so that your amendment works. Are
That's
you
right.
good? Are you good?
Yeah, essentially my amendment changes the zoning ordinance and approves the staff recommendations. I think the only issue we haven't talked about is item 3, whether we extend the fence out to the north is what I understand that to be, Mary, as opposed to the live screening.
Correct.
So essentially my amendment would be to accept the staff recommendations. Is that simpler?
Yeah, I want to make sure on the record that it's on the POA property and not the quote
not
property
on.
line.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Okay,
item 1 would have, instead of along the common property line, it would be on the POA property.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Any
Yeah,
other
bring up-
questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Hill. Hill.
I do see in the recommendations from staff that the nice side of the fence facing the parking lot, and that is not what the existing homeowner has right now, right? They're looking at
No, that is what he
Nice.
has. That is what he has.
is that what he has?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That
We'll make
second
sure-
picture was from the inside of their fence.
Okay. Just want to make sure he was getting what he
What
was,
he has,
hoping.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to understand and be clear. The POA has agreed that we can place a fence there? I mean, the person?
Mr. Rose is shaking his head yes.
They have in writing, and we don't need
He
to.
is it
Mr.
right
Rose
now.
is the POA.
He's okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. All in favor?
Second.
So, yeah, we already did a second.
we
Cliff
have-
seconded it.
We have a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. So, all in favor?
Long, Mays, Roden, Hill. Opposed? Hinojosa Smith, Yingling, Matthew. Motion fails.
Because we needed a super majority. Is there another option that would... Well, I'm asking if someone has a different motion. Well, at this time, there is no additional motion, so the motion fails. Sorry, Mr. Rose.
Be more disappointed. I think the homeowners will be more disappointed than I am.
Okay. Now we will go to item 9. We will open the public hearing. And Mary, you can read that one in. Or do you see it? And you're on mute.
I have an agenda, so I'm good.
Thank you.
Item 9, consider approval of PD 301R-HC Beltline Properties, Dave & Buster's, a zoning change request from agriculture to PD 301R-HC, plan development 301R highway commercial, to approve a conceptual site plan for 4 buildings and a detailed site plan for an approximate 78,400 square foot office building on 16.72 acres of land located at the southeast corner of Dividend Drive and South Beltline Road, at the request of Beltline Properties, LLC, being represented by WGI, Inc. All right. Next slide, please. So this is one of the few properties that's located on the east side of South Beltline Road and just north of I-635 that is located in Coppell. The eastern perimeter of the site is the city limit line between the city of Coppell and the city of Dallas, otherwise known as Cypress Waters Development. To the west is the Caliber Home Loans office building and the new Point West development, which is under construction, containing retail, restaurants, and hotels. This request to rezone from agriculture to PD 301R is to approve a conceptual site plan for 4 office buildings and a detailed site plan for an approximate 78,400 square foot office building on 16.722 acres of land located at the southeast corner of Dividend Drive and South Beltline Road. Next. So the concept plan identifies 4 buildings ranging in size from 19,000 square feet up to approximately 78,400 square feet. The smaller of the buildings would be located at the southern portion of the site adjacent to the Spring Hill Suites, which is under construction. So the largest of the buildings is located on the northern portion of the site and is the building with the detailed site plan proposed for it. Next. So there is a plat that was approved at Planning and Zoning Commission that came along with this item, which will create 2 lots. One is 6 acres in size, which is outlined in green on the north. And the second will contain the remaining 10.722 acres, which can be subdivided as future development occurs. Next. So Dave & Buster's is planning to move their headquarters operations from Dallas to Coppell, and they're proposing to construct a 78,400 square foot 2-story office building. This would be located at the northern most location of the property. The building will serve to house their existing workforce as well as provide for future growth. Part of the building will also house their test kitchen. As you can see on the plans, there's a large outdoor open space area proposed behind the building. This is planned to be programmed and plans are being worked on but have not been finalized. Initial thoughts for this area are to provide space for employees to sit, eat, take a break, and possibly have some games set up for recreation, since they are Dave & Buster's. So one of the PD conditions would be that staff review and approve the programmed open space area. Being located on South Beltline Road and looking at the size of this development, a TIA or traffic impact analysis was performed for this site, and it was determined that a decel lane be constructed along Beltline Road. Next. So a PD condition is that the decel lane going into the main drive be constructed with this project. Next. The proposed Dave & Buster's building will be a painted tilt wall building accented with running bond reveals. Tall vertical windows will allow more light into the building and help frame the building on all facades, with vertical spandrel glass accenting the entrance and corners of the building. The front facade will have a two-tiered metal canopy feature with perforated panels and louvered metal sides with metal support columns. The canopy will provide both shade and sunlight as well as providing architectural detail. One of the PD conditions that they are requesting is to allow for more than 50% glass on 3 of the elevations. As currently depicted, the north elevation has 51% glazing, 59% on the east, and 53% on the west. The premise of the concept plan is that the remaining buildings share a consistent theme and style with this development. So one other PD condition is that the development of all future lots require a detailed site plan. Next. So this slide is just representing some building perspectives or renderings. So 1 and 2, so the top 2 represent the front of the building. So this would be the side that faces Beltline Road. So there you can see the canopy with the louvered metal awnings. And the bottom 2 images are behind the building. So that large green open space is part of that open programmed area. I did speak with the architect yesterday, and they are still working on that area. They don't have any finalized plans. When all of this uncertainty happened with the shelter in place, they've put finalizing those plans on hold until they're focusing their interests on getting the zoning first. Next. So the developer is proposing to have a monument sign, 60 square feet in size, which complements the building design. It will consist of a concrete base with metal panel sign cabinet, and will have the Dave & Buster's logo with the address. The sign will not be illuminated. They did not provide a sign package in terms of other signage for the building. However, they will more than likely be putting a sign on the building, and they do realize that all future signs will need to comply with city ordinance requirements. Next. This property is designated as a freeway special district on the future land use map. And so this use as a proposed multi-story office is compatible with that freeway special district. As you can see here, on the corner of South Beltline Road and Dividend Drive, they will feature a focal point next, where they are proposing to put some type of art piece there. The landscape buffer along Beltline Road will be enhanced and will range from 40 to 50 feet in width, and the landscape buffer along Dividend Drive will be roughly 30 feet in width. The concept plan identifies that the landscaping will be extended down Beltline Road as future lots develop. Due to driveway, water line, sanitary sewer line, sidewalk, and other utilities located along the front of the property, there will be 9 overstory trees placed in the landscape buffer, along with a variety of plants, shrubs, ground cover, and a meandering landscaped area. and the same design is proposed to extend along the dividend frontage drive. Next. So one of the PD conditions will require that the details of the focal point area require staff approval, and per Planning and Zoning Commission, they also were of the opinion that if you wanted that if required, you could also have City Council approval for the focal point area, and this needs to be in place, and that the art piece needs to be in place prior to the CO of the building. The programmed open space at the rear of the property will add additional usable green space to the site. In total, they're planting about 91 trees, and about a third of the site will be landscaped. Next. So we did send out letters within 200 and 800 feet and received no responses. Next. So staff is Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as staff, recommended approval of PD 301 RHC, subject to the following conditions. 1, that there may be additional comments during detailed engineering review. 2, that a plat be required. 3, that a deceleration lane be constructed on South Beltline Road with this project. 4, that the facade and overall style of the 4 buildings shall have a consistent theme. And 5, the PD conditions to allow the north elevation to have 51% glazing, 59% on the east, and 53% on the west. B, that all signage shall comply with city regulations. C, that plans for the open space shall require city staff approval. D, that the focal point area shall require staff approval and City Council approval, and shall be in place prior to the issuance of a CO for the building. And E, that a detailed site plan shall be required for the development of future lots. That is the end of my presentation, and we do have representatives for the project here available to answer questions.
Do the representatives of the project have anything that they would like to add?
Megan, do you want to introduce?
I sure can. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor and council members. My name is Megan Silva. I'm the civil engineer on the project. Phone call is Cushman & Wakefield, George Stacy, project manager. We have representatives from O'Brien Architects, who are the architects on this project, as well as Kinley Horn Landscaping. We are available for questions. We don't have a formal presentation, but ask away and we will answer anything as we can.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, and we have had no one submit any additional comments, so I will turn it over to the City Council for discussion. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hager, I wanted to ask you a question about one of the PD conditions in light of the legislation that was passed last year when we were talking about the percentages of glass on the sides of the building. The new requirements state that you can put any building material on the facade that is accepted by the building code. So can we even restrict the percentage of glass?
If that question has to do with require the building materials, we don't tell them what kind of transparent building materials. It just says glazing, so it could be windows, they could be opaque windows. We're not dictating the exact kind. All we're saying is that by glazing, and Mary, you can comment on this, that they just have, it has to have a transparent feature and acceptable under the building code. So I don't believe that we're asking for building materials. All we're doing is indicating that there's a transparent element on the facade of the building. So I think we're fine.
Okay, well, if that's what legal counsel says, I'll go with you on that. I would disagree as an architect, but I'll leave that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Roden.
The question is for Mary. The condition that this focal point come back to council for approval, over time, we've worked towards more form-based zoning and having staff approve those sorts of things. What's the thinking of bringing that back to council?
That was not on the original recommendations. That was actually from Planning and Zoning Commission. But staff is more than happy to look at that and approve it at a staff level. We have that with the Point West Shopping Center, where it has to go through staff approval. So that was more of a P&Z recommendation.
I'm just one vote, but to me, we trust our staff to approve these types of monument type entry signs all the time. I just don't see bringing that back to council.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I agree with you, Councilmember Roden. Councilmember Mays.
I was prepared to make a motion. I move to close the public hearing and approve item number 9 with conditions as specified, less the item requiring the public area approval by council, and leave that to the staff.
Thank you. Second by Councilmember Hinojosa Smith. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa Smith, Mays, Roden, Yingling, Matthew Hill. None opposed. Motion carries.
Mayor, may I add one thing?
Please.
This is George Stacy with Cushman and Wakefield. We appreciate your time tonight. And we would also ask that if council does have any ideas for the focal point, please pass those on to Mary. She and her staff have been very helpful in guiding us through this process. So we appreciate that. And we look forward to hopefully a better future with Dave & Buster's. They are obviously impacted. All their stores are closed at the moment, and they would love to be in Coppell, and we'll just pick it up from here.
Thank you very much. And you may be sorry, or staff may be sorry that you suggested that council members forward any opinions that we might have. Because trust me, we have a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Okay, item 10. This too is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. And it is to discuss and receive input regarding proposed amendment to the land use assumption, capital improvement plans, and wastewater roadway impact fees, and in accordance to Chapter 395 of the Local Government Code. And we have Kumar. Oh, yeah, there he is. He's with us remotely. How are you doing today?
Good, Mayor. How are you?
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the objective, can you move to the first? Okay, can you, next slide, please? So the objective of the agenda item is to, it's a public hearing to present and receive input regarding the proposed amendments to land use assumptions, capital improvement plans, and water, wastewater, and roadway impact fees in accordance with Chapter 395 of the Local Government Code. So this is basically providing input. There is no action item by council at the end of the presentation, and staff will request to consider approval of amendment to impact fees at the next council meeting. Next slide, please. Here is the outline of the presentation. We'll provide background on impact fees, briefly present on amendment process, key findings from the 2018-2028 impact fee study update, and we'll present the recommendation from the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee and wrap up with next steps. Next slide, please. So to provide background, so what are impact fees? Impact fee is a charge or assessment imposed by a political subdivision against new development in order to generate revenue for funding or recouping the cost of capital improvements or facility expansions necessitated by and attributable to the new development. So it is a one-time fee assessed on a new development to recover the CIP costs. Can be assessed only for the expansion, like capital expansion projects, and it cannot be used for replacement or rehabilitation of existing infrastructure. Next slide, please. City adopted impact fees, water and wastewater impact fees in 1991 and roadway impact fees in 1995. The last amendment to the impact fees adopted by the council was in 2012. Currently, the city charges $900 for water impact fees and $900 for wastewater impact fees and $150 for roadway impact fees per service unit. Service unit is a standardized measure of consumption or use of cities' roadways. As the consumption or the use of the roadway increases, the impact fee also increases. Next slide, please. So jumping into amendment process itself, impact fee process is governed by Chapter 395. And one of the steps in the amendment process is to form a capital improvement advisory committee. The role of the committee is to review key findings from the impact fee amendment study and provide recommendation to the council. For the city, the P&Z Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, act as the advisory committee. Every time we do an amendment process, there are three things that we look at: land use assumptions, capital improvement plan, and impact fees. Land use assumptions defines the growth. Using the growth, we can quantify the service units. Capital improvement plan provide the additional capacity for the assumed growth. And using the defined growth and the capital improvement plan, we can calculate the impact fees. Next slide, please. This slide provides the overview of the amendment process timeline. The staff presented to the council in a work session on February 11th. And then staff also presented to the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee on February 20th and March 19th, and also had a virtual meeting with the Advisory Committee on April 6th to receive the recommendation. We also, in order to, according to the local government code, Chapter 395, we also posted a notice on the public newspaper on March 6th regarding the April 14th public hearing. Today, we are seeking feedback from citizens to answer any questions they have, and staff will present to council on 28 to consider approval of ordinance. Throughout this process, we've been getting input and assistance from the city attorney and the city secretary office. Next slide, please. So we went through the background and the amendment process. In the next few slides, we will go through key findings from the study, focusing on land use assumptions, capital improvement plans and the proposed impact fees. Next slide, please. Land use assumptions define the future growth. Future growth is based on city's 2030 comprehensive master plan. Master plan provided the built out future land use categories and also the built out population estimates. Based on that information, it is estimated that the population growth over the next 10 years in the planning period of 2018 to 2028 will be 3% over the next 10 years. And that 3% is equivalent to 548 service units. Next slide, please. Once we define the future growth, we evaluate the existing water, wastewater, and roadway systems. We identify if the existing system has enough capacity to accommodate the future growth. If not, what are the capital improvement projects needed to provide capacity to the future growth? The map here shows water supply facilities and distribution system of the city. Existing water mains highlighted in blue provide additional capacity to the future growth. There are two locations that needed additional capacity. Those are highlighted in red. Those are on the northwest side of the city and on the southeast side of the city. So a portion of existing CIP costs and the future CIP, the two CIP projects costs were included in calculating the impact fees. Next slide, please. This map shows the wastewater collection system. The wastewater collection system, existing system, has enough capacity, and we do not need additional improvements to provide service to the future growth. A portion of the CIP cost of the highlighted existing collection system is used in the impact fee calculations. Next slide, please. Similarly, for roadway system, the city's thoroughfare system is built out for the build-out conditions. But a portion of the thoroughfare CIP cost can be used for calculating the impact fee. There are also opportunities to expand the capacity. For example, on the map, we have several intersections that can be expanded to provide additional capacity. For example, at the intersections, we can provide a left turn or a right turn only lanes so that it provides additional capacity at this intersection. So a portion of the thoroughfare CIP costs and these improvements at the intersections was included in the impact fee calculations. Next slide, please. So using the future growth and the CIP costs, the impact fees were calculated for water, wastewater, and roadway. The proposed impact fees for water are $1,328 per service unit, $446 for wastewater, and $178 for roadway. And when we, next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison of city's current impact fees to the proposed impact fees. Currently, the city charges $900 for water impact fees, and the proposed is at $1,328. For wastewater, it's $900, and the proposed is $446. For roadway, it's $150, and the proposed is at $178. Next slide, please. So this table shows examples of current and proposed water and wastewater impact fees. for single family using a standard 3x4 inch by 5/8 inch water meter, the current water impact fee is $900. And for the current wastewater impact fee is $900. And the combined for water and wastewater is $1,800. The proposed water impact fee for the single family lot is at $1,328 and wastewater is at $446. The total proposed combined impact fee is $1,774. So when you combine the water and wastewater impact fees, the current and proposed are very close. Similarly, we have another example shown here for commercial and retail using a 2-inch water meter. So the impact fees proportionally increases as the meter size increases because the consumption increases, so the impact fee increases. And similarly, the total water and wastewater for current impact fees are $9,548, and for the proposed are $9,400. Next slide, please. Similarly, we did the same comparison for the roadway impact fees. This slide shows example of roadway impact fees for single family and commercial and retail. The service unit here is based on number of vehicle miles for each land use. For residential, it's for single family lot, it's 2.97 vehicle miles. So currently we are assessing at $446 and the proposed rate is at $529. Similarly, for a commercial, a retail with 1,000 square feet footprint that has a higher vehicle miles, that is 11.43 vehicle miles. And the SS currently we are assessing at $1,715 and proposed is at $2,035. These slides conclude the update from the study. Next slide, please. The staff and consultant presented to the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee on February 20th and March 19th, and also received a recommendation on April 6th. Committee is in agreement, concurrence with the information presented in the land use assumptions for impact fees, the impact fee capital improvement plans, and the resultant cost per service unit calculations. And they are providing recommendation to the council to amend the collection rates to the following: water impact fee at $1,328 per service unit, wastewater at $446 per service unit, and roadway at $178 per service unit. Next slide, please. This brings to the last slide of the presentation. This kind of like addresses the next steps. Today we want to present to the public, get any input, answer any questions from the citizens and also the council. The next step is for the city council to consider approval of ordinance on April 28th. Next slide, please. That concludes the updates on the study, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I know we have seen this a couple of times, and there are none. There are no public comments. So hopefully for those of you that are out there, if you have questions or comments, please let us know, and we will be able to answer any of the questions going forward. Council, any questions, comments? Seeing none, we just need a motion to close the public hearing. Councilmember Yingling.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to close the public hearing on item number 10.
Is there a second? Councilmember Hinojosa Smith. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa Smith, Mays, Roden, Yingling, Matthew Hill. None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the presentation. And public, please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Item 11, consider approval to enter into an interlocal cooperation contract with the University of Texas at Arlington for the inspection and analysis of 150,000 feet of sanitary sewer system in the amount of $895,150 as provided for in the 2018 bond issue, and authorizing the mayor to sign any necessary documents. We have Mr. Garza here to talk us through there. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Welcome to my office. Yes, agenda item number 11 is, you can start with the next slide, please, is to consider approval of the interlocal cooperation contract with the University of Texas at Arlington to perform detailed sanitary sewer inspection and predictive analysis in the amount of $895,150. Now, we're leveraging the University of Texas at Arlington because they are the experts in pipe. They have a specialized pipe research team that has developed an algorithm that to model and use artificial intelligence to predict the remaining useful life of pipe segments. What that means is it'll allow us to specifically maintain our system to each segment rather than guessing of where we want to maintain. And I'll explain that further here in a minute. They have done it for several cities across the Metroplex. Matter of fact, we've even used them as a pilot program along South Beltline. We were pleased with the process and the final product they returned to us, and so we wanted to continue utilizing UTA to inspect our system. Next slide, please. Now, what I want to do here is kind of refresh your memory on and some background on how we got to where we are today. So the city owns and maintains over 900,000 feet of sanitary sewer or wastewater mains throughout the city. And to clarify, the wastewater is the water that's wasted when you take a shower, wash your clothes, dishes, flush a toilet, etc. And once it leaves your house, it goes through our system and it ends up at the Trinity River Authority treatment plant. So TRA treats our wastewater and we get charged for the treatment of that wastewater. Well, in 2014, we saw a large increase in flow and increase in charges from that wastewater related to inflow and infiltration. Matter of fact, it was over $1 million worth of surcharges over what we expected for that year. And it was all related to inflow and infiltration. Next slide, please. So just an explanation of what inflow and infiltration is. It's directly tied to stormwater runoff or rainfall events. Inflow is the direct flow from open pipes, open manholes, separations in pipes. It's where a large quantity of water can enter the system very easily. And then infiltration is the smaller cracks in the pipe or areas where groundwater can infiltrate the system through small cracks, through root penetrations and certain things like that, smaller openings, and they're delayed from the actual storm event. So that's usually over the next few hours after a storm event, it's usually several hours or days when we see the infiltration occur. Next slide, please. So from the 2014 increased flows, we determined that we needed to do some flow monitoring throughout the city. And so we engaged in a consultant to perform the flow monitoring for us. And we have 22 basins of sanitary sewer that flows in our system. And of those 22, we identified 2 specific basins from the flow monitoring that were the high contributors to those increased flows in that time period. And so from those 22, we did a detailed CCTV inspection of that system. And unfortunately, we weren't able to really find the smoking gun, the one that caused our big high flows during the rain events. But in 2017, we did come across a broken pipe segment underneath Parkway Boulevard in Cowboy, under the bridge there at Parkway, where a section of pipe had corroded and collapsed underneath the concrete embankment. That's the picture on the left there. It was hidden behind the concrete embankment, and anytime we received a 3/4 inch or an inch of rain, that Cottonwood Creek would rise and it would dump into our sanitary sewer system, and in direct relation causing the high flows at our lift station and ultimately at TRA. We found that segment of pipe. We replaced that segment of pipe. Matter of fact, not just that segment, we ended up replacing about 5,000 feet of that entire section. And since then, our flows have returned back to pre-2014 flows. We're back to normal. However, there are times when we do have high rain events. We do spike during certain rain events and certain quantities of rain events. So we know that there are still some inflow and infiltration problems throughout our system. Next slide, please. So the idea is to continue our efforts and identify and eliminate these sections that are causing water to enter during rain events. We want to continue our investigations of our system, and also to avoid the additional charges from TRA. So we are partnering with UTA to help us identify these failures in the system and potential failures due to the high-risk pipes that have a shorter remaining useful life. So UTA partners with Red Zone Robotics to perform these detailed inspections. What Red Zone Robotics does is they utilize innovative tools, cameras, sensors that go through the pipes, and they can detect defects and failures in the system that we can't see to the naked eye. And then UTA takes that information, those analytics, runs it through their algorithms and models, and they're able to predict the remaining useful life of those pipe segments based off the information and data collected. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of what that looks like. On the left side, you have pipe A and B. To me, to the naked eye, both pipes look like they're in bad shape. They're corroded segments of pipe. But if you look on the right side picture, the top portion, pipe A, there's only 10% corrosion on that pipe. Whereas pipe B has 90% corrosion, and you can tell by the ovality of the outer circle on that picture there, which means failure is imminent on that second pipe. Next slide. So UTA and Red Zone will inspect 150,000 feet of pipe in our system, which is about 15% of our entire system. From our asset management plan that we completed last year, this includes all of our high risk pipe that was identified in the asset management plan. And when I mean high risk, they're the ones that were identified. They're either adjacent to waterways where water can easily infiltrate or inflow into the system, age of pipe, material of pipe, or extensive work orders type thing. Those are the ones that were labeled as high risk. And so what we will do is we will inspect all these high risk pipe, most of the larger diameter pipe, and then the older clay pipe is the ones that we will inspect. From that, the UTA will perform their data collection and remaining useful life. And so the idea is that we get that information. They tell us that a segment of pipe has a extended useful life of X. And so in the past, what we would do is we would go and fix, because we saw a failure in one section of pipe, we would fix that failure. But then just because that failed, we assumed that the remaining sections of the pipe were going to fail, and we would fix the entire length of the pipe. In reality, the remaining sections of the pipe may still have 50 to 60 to 100 years remaining useful life, but we don't know that. What this is going to tell us is exactly how much time is left, useful life of that pipe is left, so that we can fix what needs to be fixed and be able to utilize our resources in other locations. And so the idea is that we continue to prioritize and efficiently plan and repair our maintenance of our infrastructure. So from the results, that's the idea, is that we'll continue this phase of the project, in which will be continue to design and construct any necessary repairs to minimize the I&I, to minimize the potential for the surcharges by TRA. We will complete this plan and then continue on in future years at selectively inspecting the remainder of the system. Next slide. Please. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Council, questions, thoughts? Oh, okay. Sorry. Councilmember Mays.
Thank you. Hey, Mike, based on the amount of infiltration that you see during rain events, is there any way to estimate how bad our current failures are, or would it just be even a wild guess?
So, and the way we compare it now is and this is a good example. So in 2015, luckily, we put the flow monitor in 2015 at the right time. It was right before the floods and the rain events. And so we were seeing peaks of about 12 to 13, 14 million gallons a day. Our baseline, our normal relative dry weather is about 3.3 million gallons a day through our system. On the rain events of 2015, we were getting upwards of 14, I think even 16 at some point, 16 million gallons a day. Now, if we see a higher rain event, the most recent one we've seen, we've gotten up to about 6 or 7 million gallons a day. So nowhere near the inflow that we saw in 2015. We still know that there are areas of concern. The biggest concern is we don't know what we don't know, and any of these areas could potentially collapse at any time, and then we're back to the 16, 17 million gallons a day that we don't want to get to.
So if I'm hearing you, whatever we have right now is relatively small, but we had enough trouble finding the big one back in 2014. So these, unless you do some very sophisticated analysis and measurements, you're really not going to find it.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Roden.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Garza, I just want to make sure I was clear in this era that we're in of concern about ongoing revenues. If I understand from your presentation, this study will be paid for by previously approved bond fund dollars, and the only impact on budgets going forward would be the debt service on those bond funds?
That is correct, and it's through the water sewer funds.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And hopefully, if they find more places that need to be fixed, then it will be less I&I in the future, right?
That is correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Mike. Mike, have we considered anyone else to do this study?
So yes, we have. When we did it in 2015, we did a similar type project. The difference is University of Texas at Arlington is really the only team that has a predictive model like this in the area. Virginia Tech is another university that does that, and there's some in Canada and Finland. But the model, the information that we're receiving from UTA is really one of a kind in the area. The inspections can be done primarily, the actual physical inspections with the cameras. There's several companies out there that do that, but UTA is where we're leveraging the information and the opportunity to get what we need to be able to make those decisions. And then UTA is subbing the actual inspections with Red Zone.
Thank you. One more follow-up question. Are we required to get any quotes from any other companies for these type of studies?
So this is an interlocal cooperation contract with UTA, which is a government or a higher education agencies. Mr. Hager, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but since they are a higher education university, we are allowed to utilize them for services such as this.
You are correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, Councilmember Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve agenda item 11.
Second by Councilmember Yingling. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa, Smith, Mays, Roden, Yingling, Matthew, Hill. None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you very
much. Thank you.
Okay, item 12, City Manager Report.
Mayor and Council, as far as projects are concerned, I wanted to update you on multiple projects that are going on throughout the community. Regarding Freeport Parkway, Texas Sterling will be setting the bridge beams this Friday and Saturday, weather permitting. They are working with the fire and PD on traffic control and have been in contact with local businesses to let them know that that's going on. As far as the airline, once the Freeport lanes are open, the bidding process will start on airline to begin that work. On Parkway, TCO is working on the median landscaping, and they'll begin to work on the ramps and crosswalks at Hertz and Parkway. And as far as panel replacements, you've noticed that that's going along Denton Tap between Natchez and Southwestern, and so that work should continue for about another 4 to 6 weeks. As I mentioned, Parkway landscaping will be done and installed by the end of May. If you haven't been out, if you didn't go out to the farmers market this past Saturday when it never did rain, even though it was supposed to, the storefronts are installed, and so there's some final punch items that are going on, but they look nice out if you haven't been out there to see. The CHS connector trail, the concrete work has been, and grading should be completed by the end of the month, and then installing the landscaping, screening, and sod and irrigation. So hopefully that'll be completed by the end of May as well, again, weather permitting. MacArthur Trail. A pre-construction meeting occurred yesterday, and notice to proceed will be going out on May 1st. That project is about a 6-month project, so it'll be completed before the end of the year. The Arts Center, as expected, with what the stay-at-home, safe-at-home contractor orders as far as them having to split their work, it looks like now that the new estimated time will be early June for completion. So we're still waiting on working with the contractor on that. So that's an update on the projects that are going on around. Oh, yes.
Just a quick question on the panels. Was that scheduled, or did we just luck out on the timing of that with the low traffic that we're experiencing right now?
Right. It was budgeted, but I know Kent's listening, but so I don't want to say this incorrectly. We took advantage of the timing.
Okay.
It would normally have taken place during the summer when school's out. I mean,
Well,
that's when we've done it in the past. But because school went out, we went ahead and jumped on
Well, my
it.
hat's off to moving that closer and taking advantage of this downtime on the traffic too. So, and I saw the panels over at the farmers market, and they look amazing. And walked actually inside, and it's a completely different feeling concept. So, great job.
So next, Mayor, I wanted to just give an update on the COVID-19. As you know, we are participating on phone calls all day, it seems like, every day, including the weekends. We did take Sunday off, though, so that Sunday we did not have a 1 o'clock phone call with the judge. I will say this. Amazingly, it's amazing to me that it took the governor and the attorney general to still not clarify how golf courses are supposed to be open. Mm-hmm. And you would be amazed that of all the things going on in COVID-19, the golf courses seem to be occupying a tremendous amount of time, so much so that Judge Jenkins talked about it today on his 12 o'clock call. Letters have been sent out to the golf courses throughout Dallas, and I believe the one to River Chase was delivered today. I know this is really important for a lot of folks, and they are working with the Dallas County Judge and the local PGA to try to clarify, because in essence what it says is golf courses can be open but nobody can work. So the courses that are privately owned, I'm not sure how that works, and we don't have a publicly owned course, so it's not an issue for us, but River Chase is trying to figure out how they can operate under the rules that have been laid out for operation. So for those that are golfers out there, we apologize for the confusion, but as I said, it took the governor and the attorney general to actually render an opinion about whether or not they should or shouldn't be open, and now that the rules are in place, nobody can figure out how they're supposed to be played. So glad we got that out of the way. The thing that I really wanted to address today, and then I'm going to ask Kevin to jump in, and then I'll jump back. But one of the things that I wanted to just go over is the financial condition of the city. We talked about this before, and just as just a reminder, I'm not sure that it was really supposed to work out this way, but as you know, with Senate Bill 2 and the property tax revenue restrictions that were going to be placed on us this year, we had already started making plans for what the budget reductions would be going forward. Then the comptroller proposed the Rule 3.334, which, by the way, we did submit our comments on April the 3rd as requested by the state comptroller. From a schedule standpoint, what we understand is that the comptroller, if he is going to finalize the rule, has to do that by July 3rd. Our understanding is also that there's a possibility that the rule may not go into place until October 1st of 2020 at the earliest, or possibly October 1st of 2021. Either way, we are planning as if the rule were in place because that's just the way that we need to do that. And just as a reminder, the idea there is that 60% of our sales tax revenues were going to be negatively impacted, which in the general fund would be around $12 million, in addition to our other funds. With that being said, though, as the weeks went by, we were able to start, if you will, talking to our local businesses to have a better understanding of how they source their sales, what they do from an operational standpoint, and then look at the rule as it was proposed. And in the rule, there's some language that would allow our Chapter 380 agreements with 3 of our businesses that are currently taking advantage of them to gradually phase out those Chapter 380 agreements. So as opposed to being hit with an immediate $12 million negative revenue, we could stair-step but we'll eventually, by 2023, we think, 24, have the full impact of the $12 million reduction in sales tax. So I'm sorry to go back on that, but I think it's important for everybody to hear that because we are getting ready to actually next week start talking with our staff on budget reviews because we started the budget process in February and we'll be meeting with the council as early as May in the budget process itself. But to the point today, our financial condition is extremely strong. You know, as I mentioned, we've already started working on the budget because of what we did for Rule 3.334. Our staff was prepared and ready to take on this COVID-19 as it relates to the revenues and expenditures. At the end of fiscal year 2019, our general fund unassigned fund balance was $34.3 million. So remember the way that our fund balance is set up. We have assigned funds for various projects that the council has identified, and then we had this unassigned fund balance at $34.3 million. Just to put that in perspective, that's 46% of our overall budget. So we have an undesignated fund balance that represents almost half of our entire operations budget for a year. So that gives us a lot of flexibility if not another dime came in. Of course, that's not the way it's going to work. And to that point, I know the mayor's going to talk a little bit about this in a minute as far as our business community. Mindy and her team are doing a great job and being in contact with our local businesses. As I described to somebody, it's kind of interesting how this is working because we were planning to lose about 60% of our sales tax this year and had made the moves. We froze our employees. We now have 31 positions that are not filled in the city. We cut back on our particular expenses and everything along those lines, anticipating the revenue loss. Well, instead of having that happen, obviously COVID-19 comes along. Well, remember the other 40% of our sales tax is coming from the small businesses and the restaurants and everything. So in Mindy's contact with our West Side businesses, folks like Uline and other types of companies, their business is actually staying pretty steady and pretty strong. And some businesses, because of what they do, it's actually picked up the business. Now in others, there is a loss, obviously, that they're closed. But what's happened is with all our restaurants just basically doing takeout now and our small businesses being impacted, what's happened is there's a little bit of a balancing act to what we were planning for. So while we were thinking that we were going to get hit with about a 60% reduction, for the balance of the year now we're thinking it's probably closer to 40 to 50%. So it's still a negative. But from a planning perspective, we were actually in a better position than what's happening is related to COVID-19. So I know that sounds a little odd, but it's I'm looking at it purely from a revenue and expenditure standpoint. Another area that is getting negatively impacted is our hotels. And as you know, it's only been the last few years that we've had hotels constructed in Coppell, and we have other hotels that are coming online. Well, fortunately, we do not, to this point, because we haven't really had the revenue to do it, we haven't been funding things out of the hotel motel tax. And so whereas some communities, and I think many of you probably saw, obviously we're nowhere close to this, but the city of San Antonio on their hotel motel tax is expecting about a $100 million hit. So hotel motel is not a huge revenue generator for us, but it is something that is taking a hit, if you will. And it's just basically based on the performance of people not traveling and everything. So for us, that's not something that causes us any real concern. As I mentioned to you, the general fund has a very strong fund balance. For the sales tax for the year, we're estimating that, as I said before, between 40 and 50% a reduction in our sales tax. But there's some other areas that are being impacted, and we talked a little bit about this last time. And I'll use specifically Parks and Recreation. With the Corps being closed and with our Parks summer camp program not going forward and our pool being closed, we're anticipating through that operation, if you will, a reduction of about $1.3 million in revenues for this year. Now, the offset of that a little bit is the fact that we didn't hire all that staff, right? So we have some savings, if you will, from not hiring that staff. Overall, from a expenditure standpoint, so far we're looking at about anywhere from $1.5 to $1.8 million in reductions in expenditures. So again, we're monitoring that, looking at that, and just realize, and you know, y'all see these monthly reports. There's a 2-month lag on the sales tax report. So it won't be till May till we see March's sales tax, and it won't be till June till we see April's sales tax. Not necessarily knowing how this is going to play out in the month of May, just anticipate, even if there's a slow roll for having us come out of this from an economic standpoint, you can see where the balance of the year is negatively generally going to be impacted. Now, one of the things, just as an FYI, related to what COVID means to us, you know, the judge's order started on March the 13th, Friday night. And since that time, we've spent a little over 3,000 hours and staff time dealing with nothing but COVID-19 related activities. So that puts our expense around $145,000 in terms of staff time and everything. Then the other side of that, and expenses, the other side of that is we have, for personal protection equipment and other things related to COVID-19, our expenditures so far are around $53,000 for that. So that gives you a general overview of what's happening from a budget perspective as we look to close out 2020, the 1920 budget. And as we begin the 2021 budget, we had already taken into account a revenue reduction that was already significant. And so COVID-19 is not going to compound that on us. We're working our way through that as well. At this time, I'd stop and ask if you have any questions, but just so you'll know, I've asked Kevin to jump in because I wanted Kevin to give the perspective from a public safety standpoint and from a standpoint of how we're responding through our EOC and the kinds of things that they are planning for and have put into place. So I'll stop, answer any questions related to the budget, and then we'll turn it over to Kevin.
Councilmember Yingling.
Thank you. Mike, with the money that you just talked about with the COVID, is that money that we are hoping that we might get some funding from the state on to reimburse?
It is possible that we could be reimbursed. We're doing everything so that we can submit for reimbursement. The CARES Act, though, the first 3 stimulus bills did not have money for cities under 500,000. The money is going to the state based on our understanding of how that's going to work. Is the state's going to get theirs first. So the likelihood we're going to be reimbursed is pretty small, but we're doing everything we can to record our time and expenses in accordance with our standards that are required of us. And Kevin can talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you.
Wes has got his hand up.
Councilmember Mays.
Thanks, Mike. Are we still accepting applications for the charitable organizations for consideration during the budget process this year?
I believe that mail out just went out. I believe it just went out.
So we still are?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Long. No? I'm sorry. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay. Kevin, let me turn it over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me again. Not sure what our viewing public is, but my name is Kevin Richardson, and I serve as the fire chief here for the city. And I'm here tonight to provide a quick update on what the city's response has been to the coronavirus pandemic. I think it's been maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago since we did the town hall style meeting, so I'll try to cover some different. So, believe it or not, yesterday was our 30th day since we issued an incident response number for us to manage the incident. And so for the last 30 days, let me give you an example of what our routine has been. So each morning, the Emergency Operations Center has been active, what we call level 2 at Life Safety Park. Level 4 is our daily, our normal operational periods. Level 3 would be something that was more of a awareness piece, and level 2 means we actually have an incident. And so at 7:45, the command staff for the incident management team, we get together, have a brief meeting. Then every morning at 8:15 a.m., we hold a staff briefing where 38 members of the city listen to the command staff as we identify operational objectives for the day. Areas that need emphasis, talk about some issues that need to get handled for the day. Then we break. Then we let our section chiefs that are assigned to the incident management team that are involved from all city departments. Would be operations, which is fire, police, planning, logistics, and finance, along with our public information officer, our technical resource officer, safety officer, and the logistics people. And so they all have predetermined assignments for that day. We reconvene at 2:30, and at that time it's a more in the weeds meeting. Only the section chiefs, there's 8 of them, attend a conference call where we get in deep down into the details of what happened for the day. We have an action tracker report, what needs to occur, what doesn't happen. After that call's over, the command staff hangs back. We reevaluate, make a new draft of the incident action plan. We make all the adjustments, get it ready before we leave for the day, and do it all again the next morning. And we've been doing that for the last 30 days. We have a great staff of people that are getting really, really good at what they're assigned to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mentioned the term operational objectives, so I'll kind of give you an idea of what those would be. Operational objectives are very basic in nature. And then each individual department has more specific ones that are tied directly to that objective. For instance, one objective is to provide for the safety, health, welfare, and security of our city employees, our responders, citizens, stakeholders, and visitors through a sustained delivery of public safety and other mission essential services. So other essential services, how do we manage that? So we have that continuity of operations plan for the city. That's how do we maintain government, our essential services of water, sewer, roads, and things of that nature. Then we utilize our emergency operations plan as the thing that we do, manage our daily operations. That would be tied to the public safety side. I'll give you some ideas of some of the things from the fire department side that we've been dealing with, just to give you an idea. Early on, we had to start with our prevention measures to make sure that our workforce was safe, to make sure that we protected them. We had to have them at work and not being sick or infected or not able to work. So we had to implement some standards early on. We were doing screening of our employees before the incident, restricted some of the travel, off-duty we eliminated their exposure through off-duty training and other issues such as that. We had to implement a pretty extensive personal protective equipment training regimen. As you know, this is kind of pandemics are interesting times, and if you watch the news, you see the level of PPE that first responders are having to wear, and there's method to the madness. There's specific ways that they have to don and doff that equipment. And if you recall that there were shortages of some of this equipment, and our supply units and logistics folks did a phenomenal job of making sure that we didn't run out of that much needed equipment to protect our people. Our stock as well, we're prepared for if there's a push or a surge in our emergency calls, we're prepared for that as well. Dr. Malone last time talked a little bit about our treatment regimens and how we treat our patients. And I'll tell you that our paramedics on a daily basis are dealing with people that we consider positive screens, which means they have high potential based on their signs and symptoms. We're not doing COVID testing in the field. We have protocol that determines what level and how we treat them. If they require transport, there's obviously some specific deals we have to deal with on the hospital side, make sure they're capable. They have a bed space, they have special units, and when we arrive, the paramedics have certain protocol they have to do before they even enter the hospitals. And after the call, of course, there's a decontamination process for the crew that made the call. Then there's disinfecting procedures to make sure that the ambulances and all the other equipment's disinfected properly and ready to go again. I'll kind of share a couple of things that we've just enacted. We just outfitted one of our ambulances as a dedicated COVID screen positive transport unit, which means if we have patients that meet these certain criteria in the field, we will call this special ambulance and only utilize that. We've outfitted it inside to where it has a much less equipment that can get contaminated. The compartments are sealed. It's got some special decontamination stuff. It's got some special personal protective equipment. It's basically to prevent spreading amongst our fleet if we have that problem. And when we do run those patients, we have a process and a vendor that comes and helps us decontaminate with some industrial style equipment. The other thing that we're doing this week as well is we're anticipating this surge, or what they're calling a peak in our area. And based on some of the training and modeling work been monitoring, we're about 2 weeks out from that. And so our dispatch center is really taking a very proactive role, learning from some of the really hot areas in the United States and what they're having to deal with. If we ever get to a point of that, we have to have a plan and we're prepared. So what I'm getting at is if the emergency medical services system and our dispatchers get overwhelmed with just an unmanageable amount of calls, we are in the process. We started Monday training our paramedics to work in our dispatch facility with the purpose of screening calls. So what they'll be doing is triaging calls as they come in to determine what level of response we may have to make an adjustment to if we have available units, or not transport, depending on the severity of the injury, or maybe even make adjustments or work with mutual aid or whatever we have to do to make sure we have enough people on the call. And so we have never done that before, to put paramedics in our dispatch center for that purpose of triaging calls. So we'll have the plan in place. If we need to pull the trigger, we can. But if we don't have to, then that'd be a great day. But we are planning ahead. So I think no matter what happens, I think we'll be prepared. We've been monitoring our burn rates of our personal protective equipment. Our stocks are good. Our workforce is healthy. We haven't seen a whole lot of sick situations with our own people. Now, obviously, they have their own families to consider. So we have some of that going on, whether it's a child care issue or a family member who's not feeling well or something of that nature, or their spouse's work has been impacted. So we're kind of working through them, but overall, we're in a really, really good place. We have not seen a strain on our system as today. And I think that's part of some really good planning from a lot of folks in the city. Another objective I can kind of talk about real quick is the accurate and timely dissemination of information to our employees, stakeholders, and public. And so that's a big job for our public information folks, because as you are aware, there's so much information coming out every day, and we have to decipher through that to find out what's important, what do we need to communicate to our people, and then how do we communicate to the city. There's Family First Coronavirus Act stuff our HR folks have to deal with. Our city management folks are doing videos to our workforce to kind of help them stay involved. Our social media sites are all active. We have press releases that go out every day. So it's a constant, it's an evolving situation. Another objective that we have is kind of the follow-up to Ms. Yingling's question about sustaining maximum incident cost containment and recovery by complying with documentation requirements and providing timely statistical data and making decisions. And so, yes, that is evolving. Our finance people are involved in webinars and in conference calls every day, and our documentation, our record keeping is right on point. It's a typical government forms, and there's a bunch of them. But when the time comes, we'll definitely be submitting whatever we're eligible for. Try to make sure that we follow up as much as we can as far as the cost containment piece is. Another objective is to maintain situational awareness from local, state, and national levels. I kind of talked a little bit about that. There's just so much going on, and we have to have folks that are constantly paying attention. I think I looked at the conference call board today, and we had folks that were listening to conference calls for 8 straight hours. We have to have a whiteboard to keep track of all the different calls going on, and assign note takers so that we can decipher the information. So it's kind of interesting to watch it all take place. And so in summary, I would just kind of say that yes, it's an evolving situation. You know, every day brings new challenges and issues, and you know, although we have not experienced any critical levels yet, I feel very comfortable that we're going to be prepared, especially in the next 2 weeks, anticipating this surge or this peak that they're talking about. And we're going to continue to make adjustments and decisions that are in the best interest of the city and the welfare of our community. And I just can't elaborate enough on how many people are involved in the city. They have a great team of staff. We're actually on a rotation right now. We're rotating staff in about every 2 weeks. So we're ending our 4th week, so we're rotating staff around to give others involved. But, you know, overall, our mission is going to be always to provide for the safety, health, and welfare of our community. And that's what we kind of plan on intending doing until this thing until we reach the curve and don't have to do that. And at that point, what we'll end up doing is transition to a recovery phase, and that'll be the part about getting our community, our operations, our service levels back to normal. And that'll take some time amongst itself. So that's just a quick update. If anybody has any questions about anything the city's doing in response, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Hearing none. Back to you, Mr.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's important. It's another way for us to make sure that people know what's all going on behind the scenes, because that's not something that you normally get a window to take a look at. But it is an amazing thing to see this organization and the team work the way that they do on behalf of the community. I just want to go over a couple more things and then turn it over to you, Mayor. At the Senior Center, as an example, Lacey and her team are sending out weekly emails. They are providing virtual programming. Right now, they're doing a big push on census. By the way, everybody needs to do their census work. Get that done while you're at home. It only takes a few minutes. And next week, they will be doing a virtual wellness check for their members. So the Senior Center and the Community Center is staying very active. So that was for you, Brianna. As you know, we have put the roll-offs out at the Service Center and at the core. And the first week was a little bit rough, but it's gotten better as far as utilization and balance, if you will. And we appreciate the community's support in this because remember, this was a request that came from Republic, our service provider, because of their concern, given their workforce and being able to have a workforce that's there to support us and continuing to pick up our trash. The parks are being monitored by staff in the evenings. So, for the first few weeks, that wasn't going on. And I would say that was probably some of the most phone calls we would receive was about social distancing versus volleyball, basketball, and some other sports. So now we are going out at certain times during the day. I won't say when, but we are providing reminders of social distancing in our parks. I want to compliment the community. The community's been extremely gracious and supportive as we go through these uncharted waters. We get very few phone calls of any kind of major concerns. We do have folks that are looking out for their neighbors and would like us to help remind them of social distancing and everything along those lines, and that's fine. We do get calls from some of the businesses, some of the employees in some of the businesses. Just as a reminder, Dallas County has their health folks driving our community, checking, walking in, and making sure social distancing is going on, whether it's the grocery stores or it's some of our businesses. So the county is really taking that on there. We are doing our best to engage the community, and as someone said the other day, while we do all this, there are still people who probably don't even know COVID-19 is going on. So while we're pushing out a lot of information and a lot of links, a lot of sharing of information from other cities about what's going on, and creating opportunities for our community to interact. I know that there is one of the things that really does work to our advantage in Coppell, and I know that the mayor is getting ready to talk about that, is that we have a lot of people who want to help and support. Well, fortunately for us, because of our relationship and support of MetroCrest Services and other social services in the that serve our community, we're able to funnel these folks to a service that already exists on behalf of our community. And that makes our job that much easier. We have not had to create a Coppell Cares or anything along those particular lines, if you will, because we have such strong support from our social services. And I know the mayor's going to talk a little bit about that now, and I believe we'll be talking about it again probably on our April 28th meeting as well. So, Mayor, that's my report on the COVID-19 progress in terms of what's going on. I will remind everyone that on the 28th, the council will have an opportunity to take a look at the stay-at-home order, safe order. At that time, we'll also be hopefully having some direction from the county because the county's order is over on April the 30th. Now, today's call with Judge Jenkins, he indicated that while the signs are positive as far as how we're doing as far as flattening the curve, based on all the numbers, and you heard Kevin mention it, they're talking about the peak now being the end of April, the 1st of May. So there's probably a likelihood that the safe-at-home, stay-at-home order will stay in place for a little bit longer than April 30th. But the judge was very encouraged by what the science and basically the math is telling the medical experts about the way the numbers. People are adhering to the stay-at-home, safe-at-home. They are adhering to the social distancing. Our numbers, just to put it in perspective, we have 21 positive cases identified in Coppell. That number has continued to rise, but it also makes sense because there's more testing going on. So you remember we talked about that, the fact that you're going to have more testing is going to identify more positives are going to show up. Guess what that peak's going to look like it's going to look. But the judge was very encouraged today, a lot of positive news. And a lot more tests are becoming online within the next few weeks too. So it's all a good thing. So with that, Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, Mike, just for the viewing public, and it's my understanding that if the Judge Jenkins comes down with an extension, then we would, as a city, have to go ahead and follow that. Unless we wanted to make something stricter, we couldn't go. We couldn't go looser. We'd have to go stricter. Just for people who are viewing.
Yes, the way the way it works, and the Dallas County and the judge and the commissioner's court working together, they have the ability to declare the emergency for all of Dallas County, which they've done. They have the ability to issue whatever orders that they have related to that medical emergency that they've done. And so if they were to continue it on, it would apply to us whether or not this council said that it should or shouldn't, because that is the way that the law works. There's been talk by the governor about sometime this week, I guess. He's supposed to unveil his plan for how he's going to allow the economy to come back around. Even with that, there will be conditions. And so people have to pay attention to what are those conditions. And the county judge and his team of the medical advisors that he has are going to be watching that same conditions to see how they apply to Dallas County. But at the end of the day, it stops with the judge. And being that majority of our community is in Dallas County, we're going to abide by that. And one of the things that, we also have a part of the city in Denton County. And so the reason why the orders come through the city council is because it applies to the whole city, not depending on what Denton County does. So that way it's uniform across the board. There are cities that are in 4 different counties, basically, and, they have to adjust accordingly, and that's why it works the way it does. So I hope that answers that question.
No, thank you. It does. I just wanted to make sure. I know there's some people probably watching that maybe needed some clarification on that. Thanks.
Any other questions? I'm looking up at the monitors. One of the things that we have talked about over and over again is how we want to support our businesses. And Mindy Hurley and her group have been very concentrated on that particular item. We do know that some businesses have decided to close temporarily during this time frame, but we also want to support those that have been open and that remain open even though their door looks closed. But some of the things that have been happening to support our local businesses are there is an electronic sign on Freeport that has been running social distancing and eat local. There's a sign on Denton Tap now that reads buy in Coppell or eat local, shop local. And then there's a second sign, electronic sign that is being fixed right now, and that will also be put on Denton Tap. We have printed banners, and we are providing those at the entrances of the city that says be vocal, shop local, buy in Coppell. And these banisters will be going up next week. We will also have free banners for our businesses that says, yes, we are open, buy in Coppell. Mindy and her team have been pulling together purchasing gift cards from each of the local restaurants and are putting a small business assistance page on the website for Coppell businesses. We had our intern call every retail-oriented or service-oriented small business. We are still waiting for some of those calls to be returned, but basically we're placing a list on the website and promoting them through social media and the website. We are doing different social media campaigns targeting our local restaurants. For example, there's a Friday night date night quarantine style where if you take your picture of you while you're picking up your dinner from a local restaurant, they want you to, post it and make sure to tell everybody why you love it. We're looking at doing some different things to promote that and to make contributions to MetroCrest services. She's also reached out to many of our Mike talked about this earlier, our top sales tax payers, and just making sure that we're doing all we can and that understanding where they are in their businesses. The city has created a web page that has all restaurants, coffee shops, tea shops, ice cream shops, grocery stores, etc., setting up assistance for delivery services. Sign restrictions are not enforced at this point. We also have all of the information regarding to SBA assistance. All the different programs that are out there are on our webpage. And then we are temporarily suspending the annual health permit fees. So we're just not invoicing those at this time. So we're trying to do whatever we can as a city to support. If you have an idea that you would like us to consider, please don't be shy. We'd be more than happy to help, because if we can help our businesses make it through this and continue, we will all be better for it in the long run. I mentioned MetroCrest services. They have experienced a large increase in the need from various individuals. As an example, just last week, they served 376% more families with food than they did the same week last year. Think of that, 376% more. It's a pretty large number. And then they also spent more than double in rent assistance at the same time. So we always talk about the giving heart that we have here in Coppell, and if you have time, because they need volunteers, if you have funds, please donate. There are a lot of people out there who are not able to work and have no other source of money to be able to feed their families, and MetroCrest has always been there for the families in Coppell who have needed them, and they have been a great partner. So please reach out to them. There's lots of ways to get in touch. You can get in touch through their website, or they're very, very aware and very, very prevalent on Facebook, or ask somebody how to get in touch with them, and we'd be more than happy to show you. They are a great group of people, and they're trying very hard to service every single person that walks through their doors. Again, it's primarily food and rent assistance that they're looking for, and they can buy food through the food bank a lot less expensively than you can go to the store and buy. And then they can also make sure that all of that is done in a safe manner for people to be able to get the food delivered and then turn around and give it out. They've created a drive-through line, so people drive through and pick up a week's worth of groceries to feed four, and that has helped them immensely in moving through some of the people who are in need. Anyone else have anything about social service agencies or people who are in need?
I just have a quick question on the. You said it's drive-through. Are they specific specific days, or is it every day? Do you happen to know at MetroCrest?
I believe that they are in their normal working hours.
Okay.
But I'm sure that that's available online.
Okay.
As well.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 14, public service announcements. We have a bit of good news. For the 4th consecutive year, the City of Coppell Fleet Services have been named one of the 100 best fleets in America. This program recognizes top performing public fleet operations in North and South America that and evaluates a number of criteria, including accountability, uses of technology and information, and collaboration. If you want to learn more about this, look at our news release that is on the website at coppelltx.gov. Mike mentioned this earlier. It is census time, and Texas is behind. We need to make sure that people, especially in this time when people supposedly have extra time, I don't know what that is, but extra time, spend 6 minutes, find your piece of paper that the government sent you on the census, get online and sign up. If Texas doesn't step up and be counted the way that we should be counted, it will cost us in the long run. So tell everybody you know, ask everybody you know, have you done your census? I ran around my office and asked about, well, it was April 1st when they started taking it. And I had a couple of people go, huh? Well, yeah, I got something in the mail, but I didn't pay attention. So I can honestly tell you that today everyone in my office has gone online. So make sure everybody in your office has done so too. And then if they take that home to their families, hopefully that will.
Because they'll come a knocking. Well, not maybe with COVID-19.
Yeah. They'll figure it out. They'll figure out a way.
Yeah.
But please, please, please tell everybody you know that it's time for the census and to get it done. Any other public service announcements? Okay, this was supposed to be a fairly short meeting, but we're getting used to this technology. We'll be better. The time is 10:07. Oh, wait, I didn't say we have no necessary action from executive session because we didn't have one. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It's a good book.